Chapter 1. The Scholar of Lost Magic. The Oxford Archives smelled of dust and desperate hope. Two things Ara had learned to navigate with equal skill over her 3 centuries of immortal life. She stood before a manuscript so ancient the vellum crumbled at the edges, her vampire eyes capable of reading the faded Latin in the dim light where human scholars would need lamps and magnifying glasses. Her heart, which no longer beat but still somehow ached, stuttered at the words. 300 years she'd searched. 300 years since Cassian had faded in her arms, his final smile peaceful, his last words a whisper of her name. 300 years of walking through a world that felt emptier despite being filled with the house she'd built, the vampires she'd saved, the humans she'd protected. House Thorn thrived. Her legacy was secure. But at night, in the manor that still bore his wards, she was alone with memories that grew sharper instead of duller with time. Impossible, she murmured, fingers hovering over the text. The archive's night security had let her in without question. Humans compelled to forget her presence the moment she left. A small abuse of power she allowed herself for research purposes. Vampire resurrection has never been documented. But the manuscript was authentic. She could feel the age of the magic woven into its pages. Written by a vampire called Morgaine the Merciful in 1347, right after the Black Death had devastated Europe. Morgaine had lost her human lover to plague, turned him in desperation, only to watch him fade from the same supernatural sickness that had claimed Cassian, the deterioration that happened when vampires were made from the dying rather than the healthy. Ara's breath, unnecessary but habitual, caught. Morgaine hadn't accepted death either. The spell required 3 elements. First, an anchor, something that had belonged to the deceased, infused with their essence. Ara's hand went to the silver ring she wore, on a chain around her neck. Cassian's ring, never removed in 3 centuries. Second, a place of power where the veil between life and death grew thin. She knew exactly where. The cemetery, where their story had begun, where his grave rested beside the empty one marking her human death. Third, a sacrifice. Her eyes tracked down the page, translating the archaic Latin with growing dread and desperate excitement. Asterisk blood of the one who loved them most, given willingly unto death. For love is the only magic stronger than death itself, and only love can call the dead back from darkness. Asterisk, death. Her final death, the true death that came to vampires who were staked, beheaded, or burned, the death from which there was no return. Ara sat back, mind racing. The manuscript continued, Morgaine's own notes written in the margins in a shaky hand. Asterisk, I succeeded. He woke, but I did not survive to see his eyes open. Let this stand as record. Resurrection magic works. The dead can return. The price is absolute. But for love, for true love, what price is too high? Asterisk, nothing, Ara whispered to the empty archive. No price is too high. She'd lived 300 years. She'd built an empire of mercy, saved countless lives, and changed vampire culture itself. House Thorn would continue without her. She'd trained successors, established systems, created something sustainable. But she'd never stopped being the lonely girl who brought food to a forgotten grave. She'd never stopped missing him. Ara carefully photographed each page of the manuscript, committing every word to memory anyway, her vampire mind perfect for such purposes. Then she replaced it exactly where she'd found it, glamored the security guard one final time, and walked out into the London night. Above her, stars wheeled in patterns Cassian had once taught her to read. He'd shown her the world, just as he'd promised. Paris, Rome, Istanbul, Kyoto, New York. Every wonder humanity had created, and nature had sculpted. She'd seen it all and remembered everything, carrying him with her in memory and grief. Now she would carry him back to life. Or die trying. Ara pulled out her phone, a concession to modernity she'd adopted decades ago, and sent 3 messages. The first to Victoria, her second in command at House Thorn, asterisk taking personal leave. Indefinite. You have full authority. Trust your training. Asterisk the second to Marcus, the vampire scholar who'd helped her research for centuries. Asterisk. Found it. Don't try to stop me. This is my choice. Asterisk. The third to Elena, her closest friend, turned during World War II and saved from execution by House Thorn's intervention. Asterisk. Remember me as someone who loved well. That's all I ever wanted. Asterisk. Then she turned off the phone, dropped it in a rubbish bin, and started walking toward the Thames. By tomorrow night, She'd be in Paris, then Rome, then home, to the small English cemetery where everything had begun and where, if magic and love held true, everything would begin again. Behind her, London glittered with 10 million human lives, each one precious, each one temporary. She'd spent 300 years protecting that precious temporariness. Now she would spend whatever time remained preparing to give her own immortality away. For him. Always for him. The wind carried the scent of rain and something else. Possibility. Magic. The peculiar electricity that preceded great change. Ara smiled, fangs glinting in the streetlight, and disappeared into the night. 300 years of searching. One spell. One chance. One sacrifice worth making. Chapter 2. The Return to Shadows. The cemetery looked exactly as Ara remembered, and nothing like it at all. 300 years had passed, but blood magic kept the manor standing, kept the graves pristine, kept the whole dell wrapped in wards that made humans unconsciously avoid this particular section. She'd maintained it all from a distance, sending proxies, paying caretakers, ensuring the 2 graves at the heart remained tended. Now she stood before them in the November darkness, come full circle to where their story had started. Cassian Thorne, 1623 to 1825, 2025 to 2025. Savior, remembered. Ara Thorne, 1809 to 2025. The girl who woke him. Morbid, marking her own grave while she still walked. But prophetic, perhaps. If the spell worked, that grave would finally hold truth. If it failed, well, she'd die knowing she'd tried everything. Hello, love, she whispered, kneeling between the 2 headstones. I'm back, and I'm not leaving without you this time. The cemetery was silent, just whined through bare branches and the distant hoot of an owl. November again, the month they'd met, the month she'd been fleeing her uncle's house toward a forgotten grave. The month that had changed everything. Ara set down her leather satchel and began unpacking. The manuscript's photographs, though she'd memorized every word, candles made from beeswax, black, red, and white, a ceremonial knife, silver, spelled for blood magic, chalk for drawing the circle, and herbs, lots of herbs, gathered from the places she and Cassian had traveled together, lavender from Provence, rosemary from Greece, nightshade from Romania, wolfsbane from the Black Forest. Each ingredient carried memory, carried meaning, carried the weight of their time together. She worked methodically, drawing the circle around both graves, placing candles at the cardinal points, arranging herbs in patterns the manuscript specified. The magic felt old as she worked, older than vampire magic, older perhaps than vampires themselves. Blood magic, Morgaine had written, predated all supernatural creatures. It was the first magic, the deepest magic, the magic of life and death and love, the only magic that could resurrect the truly dead. You'd tell me this is foolish, Ara said, continuing her conversation with the grave as she worked. You'd say I've built something important, that House Thorne needs me, that I shouldn't risk everything for a chance that might not work. She positioned the final candle, stepped back to survey her work. The circle glowed faintly in her vampire vision, power recognizing power. But you'd also understand, because you did the same for me, didn't you? Chose me over your own safety, taught me everything knowing it would bind us closer, turned me when the council would have killed you for it. Ara pulled Cassian's ring from around her neck, held it up to catch the moonlight. Silver tarnished with age, but still carrying the faintest trace of his essence. 300 years and it hadn't faded. Love, apparently, was its own preservation spell. So now it's my turn. She placed the ring in the exact center of Cassian's grave, on the earth where she knew his body rested, preserved by vampire magic into something like marble. My turn to choose you. My turn to risk everything. My turn to save you. The wind picked up, swirling dead leaves into tiny cyclones. The candles flickered but didn't go out. Ara felt the magic responding, recognizing intent, preparing for the working. The veil between life and death was always thinnest at midnight in graveyards, thinner still in places where love had left its mark. This place was soaked in love. 7 years of a girl's offerings, 3 years of partnership between vampire and new-made immortal, 300 years of Ara's vigil, her yearly returns, her flowers and stories and stubborn refusal to forget. The spell would work. It had to work. Ara checked her watch. a vintage timepiece Cassian had given her in their first year together. 11:45. 15 minutes to midnight. Time to prepare the final component. The sacrifice. She sat cross-legged at the circle's edge, pulled out the silver knife. It gleamed wicked sharp, spelled to actually harm vampire flesh, difficult magic requiring master craftsmanship. She'd commissioned it specifically for this. Had carried it for weeks, building her resolve. "I'm not afraid," she told the night, told the graves, told Cassian's sleeping spirit if it could hear her. "You taught me that. How to face fear and choose anyway. How to let love matter more than safety." Her hands didn't shake as she laid the knife across her lap. 300 years of life, and all of it had led here. Back to the beginning, back to the forgotten grave and the girl who'd remembered, back to the choice that mattered most. The manor loomed behind her, dark and familiar. She'd spent her last day there, walking through rooms full of memory. The library where Cassian had taught her vampire history. The kitchen where she'd learned she no longer needed food but could still enjoy wine. The bedroom where he'd held her through her transition, where they'd learned each other's bodies and hearts. All of it would pass to House Thorn after she was gone. Victoria would know what to do with it. The wards would hold for centuries more, protecting the cemetery, protecting these graves, protecting the love story they represented. Ara breathed unnecessarily, centering herself. The spell required complete focus, perfect pronunciation, absolute conviction. She had all three. Midnight struck in the distant church tower. The witching hour. The hour when magic worked best. Ara picked up the knife, held it over her left wrist, and began to speak Latin older than Rome, words of power and sacrifice and love. Behind her, something in the air shifted, waiting. Chapter 3. Blood and Binding. The first cut burned worse than she'd expected. Vampire flesh resisted damage, healed almost instantly from anything except the most potent weapons. The spelled silver knife parted her skin like paper, and her blood, darker than human blood, thick with 3 centuries of feeding and power, welled up immediately. Ara let it drip onto Cassian's grave, onto the earth, onto his ring. Each drop sizzled slightly as it touched the ground. Magic, recognizing magic. Sacrifice feeding, power. She continued speaking, the Latin rolling off her tongue in careful pronunciation. Asterisk, ego Ara Thorn, immortalis voluntate et amore, offero sanguinem meum, vitam meum, animam meum, pro eo quem amo plus quam mortem timens. Cassian Thorn, te revoco ex tenebris. Asterisk I, Ara Thorn, immortal by will and love, offer my blood, my life, my soul, for the one I love more than I fear death. Cassian Thorn, I call you back from darkness. The blood flowed faster now, her vampire healing struggling against the spelled blade. She cut deeper, felt her strength beginning to ebb. Good. The spell required everything. Half measures wouldn't work. Morgaine had been clear. Death was the price. Her death, given willingly, given for love. Wind howled through the cemetery now, unnatural, summoned by the magic. The candles blazed brighter, their flames turning colors that didn't exist in nature. Violet, silver, deep crimson. The circle glowed incandescent, power building, building, building. Asterisk, morte mea, vitam eis redimo. Asterisk Ara continued, voice growing weaker but no less determined. With my death, I redeem his life. Asterisk, amore meo, tenebras vinco. Asterisk, with my love, I conquer darkness. Her vision blurred. Vampire bodies could endure tremendous damage, but blood loss on this scale, combined with the silver poisoning from the blade, she wouldn't last much longer. Already her movements felt sluggish, her thoughts scattering like leaves. But the magic was working. She could feel it. Feel the veil between worlds growing gossamer thin. Feel something on the other side stirring, responding to her call. A presence she'd know anywhere, would recognize across death itself. Cassian, I'm coming, she whispered, still bleeding, still feeding the spell her life one drop at a time. Hold on, I'm coming. The ring in the center of the grave began to glow, silver turning to gold, gold to white, white to something beyond color, pure light, pure power, pure love made visible. The earth trembled, the wind shrieked, the candles became pillars of impossible flame. Ara spoke the final words, the ones that sealed the spell, that locked her sacrifice into magic irreversible. Asterisk, meum pro tuo, mea mors tua vita. Sic volo, sic jubeo, sic fiat. Asterisk mine for yours. My death, your life. So I will, so I command, so let it be done. The knife slipped from nerveless fingers. She slumped forward, her blood now soaking the earth, feeding centuries of power into ground already saturated with her love, her vigil, her stubborn refusal to forget. Darkness crowded her vision, the strange, final darkness that came to vampires in their true death. No pain, just a gradual fading, awareness slipping away like water through cupped hands. She'd done it. The spell was complete. Whether it worked, she'd never know. But she'd tried. She'd given everything, just as he'd given everything for her. Asterisk. Worth it. Asterisk, she thought as consciousness dimmed. Asterisk. Whatever happens, it was worth it. Asterisk. Her eyes closed. Her body stilled. And Era Thorne, who had been Era Thorne before that, who had been a lonely orphan girl before that, died as she'd lived, choosing love over fear, choosing him over everything else, choosing together even if she'd never see the result. The magic exploded. Light blasted outward from the circle, shattering the night, sending power rippling through the cemetery in waves. The earth over Cassian's grave cracked, split, broke apart. The headstone fell backward, and from the opening, from the earth itself, a hand emerged, pale, unmarked, alive. The hand became an arm, the arm became a shoulder. And then Cassian Thorne pulled himself from his own grave, gasping, choking on air he didn't need, but couldn't help breathing after 3 centuries of death. His eyes, still golden, still inhuman, flew open. His body, no longer deteriorating, no longer dying, surged with power, with life, with the magic that had called him back. He saw the circle, saw the candles burning with impossible colors, saw his ring blazing with light, saw blood soaking the earth, too much blood, vampire blood, her blood, and saw Ara collapsed at the circle's edge, pale, still, gone. No. The word tore from his throat, rusty but strong. No, no, no. Cassian lunged forward, caught her before she could fall completely, pulled her into his arms. Her skin was cold even for a vampire, her body limp, her eyes closed. The knife lay beside her, blade slick with silver and blood. The wound on her wrist gaped open, her healing completely overwhelmed. Ara. He pressed his hand to the wound, trying to stanch bleeding that had already stopped, trying to save someone who'd already sacrificed herself. Ara, no, you can't. You didn't. Not for me. Never for me. But she had. He could feel the spell's residue, could read what she'd done in the magic still crackling through the air. Full vampire resurrection. The one spell that required a life for a life, a death for a death, a sacrifice absolute and irreversible. She died to bring him back. You beautiful, stupid, stubborn fool, Cassian choked, gathering her closer, rocking her like he'd once rocked her through her transition. I was at peace. I was ready. You didn't have to. You should never have. Her body remained still, silent, gone. 300 years she'd lived without him. 300 years she'd built something extraordinary, changed vampire culture, saved countless lives, and then she'd thrown it all away, bet everything on a spell that worked exactly as promised. Him for her, his life for her death. An exchange the universe accepted without negotiation. Cassian Thorne, who had been dead for 300 years, held the woman who'd loved him enough to wake him twice, and wept tears he'd thought he'd forgotten how to cry. Chapter 4. The Bond That Breaks Death. Cassian didn't know how long he sat there, cradling Ara's body, lost in grief so profound it felt like dying again. Time moved strangely, the way it had during his imprisonment in darkness. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. The candles still burned, the circle still glowed, the magic still sang in the air, incomplete somehow, waiting. For what? He looked down at Ara's face, peaceful in death, beautiful even now. She looked older than he remembered, not physically. Vampires didn't age, but there was a weight to her features that spoke of centuries lived, experiences earned, wisdom gained. She'd grown without him, become someone extraordinary, and then come back to die for him. Why? He whispered, tracing her cheek. You had everything. House Thorne. I can feel its existence even now. A whole organization dedicated to mercy. You changed the world, love. You didn't need me anymore. But even as he said it, he knew the answer. He'd known the moment he'd woken, the The moment he'd seen the spell circle, the moment he'd understood what she'd done, she'd needed him because love didn't care about need. Because 300 years hadn't dimmed what they'd built in 3 years together. Because she was still, at her core, the girl who'd brought food to a forgotten grave, who couldn't bear to let someone go unremembered. She'd remembered him so hard she'd died for it. Cassian's gaze fell on their joined hands, his cradling hers, and he noticed something. The faintest trace of a mark on her left ring finger, a band of slightly paler skin where she'd worn something for so long it had left an impression even on vampire flesh. His ring. She'd worn his ring for 300 years. His other hand went to his own chest, to the place where their bond had once lived, the connection forged when he'd turned her, when she'd taken his blood and he'd taken hers, when they'd bound themselves together in the oldest vampire magic. And felt it. Faint. So faint it was barely there. But present. A thread of connection that should have died with him, should have severed when his body finally failed 300 years ago, but hadn't. Understanding crashed through him like lightning. The bond, the turning bond between maker and fledgling, between sire and progeny. It was supposed to fade over time, become negligible after a century, disappear entirely after both parties were dead. Except she'd maintained it. Somehow, impossibly, Ara had kept their bond alive for 300 years, fed it with her love, her memories, her annual visits to his grave, her absolute refusal to let him go. And the resurrection spell, fed by that bond, empowered by 3 centuries of her devotion, it hadn't just brought him back. It had created a magical loop, a connection that flowed both ways, his life anchored to her death anchored to his life. 2 ends of the same spell. "Oh, Ara," Cassian breathed, hope igniting in his chest like dawn. "You clever, impossible woman." He understood now. Understood what the spell was waiting for. Understood what Morgaine's notes had really meant. Asterisk. Let this stand as record. Resurrection magic works. The dead can return. The price is absolute. But for love, for true love, what price is too high? Asterisk. Morgaine had died, bringing her lover back. But Morgaine had been newly turned, her bond with her fledgling lover still fresh, still weak. She hadn't had 300 years of accumulated love magic strengthening it, hadn't maintained it past all reasonable expectation, hadn't fed it with nightly stories and annual flowers and stubborn devotion. Ara had. And bonds, true bonds, worked both ways. "Hold on," Cassian commanded, knowing she couldn't hear him, doing it anyway. "I'm not losing you. Not after you did this. Not after you came back for me." He grabbed the silver knife, still slick with her blood, felt it burn his palm. It didn't matter. He cut his own wrist, deep, savage, letting 300 years of accumulated death magic and brand new resurrection power flow into the wound. Then he pressed it to her mouth, to lips that no longer moved, and spoke words in the same ancient Latin she'd used. Asterisk ego Cassian Thorn, rediens ex morte, offero sanguinem meum, vidum meum, anima meum, proi quae me redimit, Ara Thorn, te revoco ex tenebris, asterisk I, Cassian Thorn, returning from death, offer my blood, my life, my soul, for the one who redeemed me. Ara Thorn, I call you back from darkness. His blood touched her tongue, flowed into her mouth, down her throat, and the bond, their bond, that impossible thread she'd maintained for 300 years, blazed to life. Power surged. The circle's light intensified. The magic, finally understanding what was being attempted, roared its approval. This was balance. This was symmetry. This was what the spell had been designed for. Not one-way sacrifice, but mutual exchange. Not death for life, but life shared, death conquered together. "Come back," Cassian demanded, pouring everything into the bond, every ounce of the power her sacrifice had given him, every drop of love he'd carried through his own death. "Come back to me, Ara. We're not done. We're never done. Together, remember? You said together was better, so come back and be together with me." Her body remained still for 1 heartbeat, 2, 3, and then she gasped. Her eyes flew open, gold meeting gold. Her hand convulsed in his. Her wound began healing, vampire flesh finally knitting together, powered by his blood, his bond, his absolute refusal to let her go. "Cassian?" Her voice was barely a whisper, confused, disbelieving. "You're but I. The spell worked." He laughed, almost sobbing. "It worked, You magnificent fool. You brought me back. And I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever. Not after 300 years, and 2 resurrections, and enough love magic to reshape reality. She stared at him, wonder and joy and disbelief warring across her face. You're alive. You're really alive, whole, healed, thanks to you. He pressed his forehead to hers, breathed unnecessarily but gratefully. And you're alive too, thanks to the bond you never let die, thanks to 300 years of love that broke every magical law I know. But the spell required a sacrifice, yes, and you gave it. And then I gave it back. Because that's what you taught me, isn't it? That love doesn't take, it gives. That the best magic is shared magic. That together is always better than alone. Ara's hands came up to cup his face, trembling, testing, making sure he was real. I can't believe. I thought I'd never. I know. He kissed her palms, her wrists, her lips. I know, love. But we're here. We're both here. Against all odds and magical law and common sense, we're both here. Around them, the spell circle dimmed, its purpose fulfilled. The candles guttered out. The magic settled, content, complete. And 2 vampires, both dead, both resurrected, both saved by love that refused to accept endings, held each other in a cemetery at dawn and laughed and cried and lived. Chapter 5. The Healing Between Heartbeats. They stayed in the circle for hours as dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, watching the sunrise together for the first time in 300 years. Cassian had missed sunrises, missed the way light transformed the world, missed the simple pleasure of Ara's face bathed in morning glow. She looked different. Older wasn't the right word. Vampires didn't age, but matured, settled into herself in a way the frightened girl he remembered had only been beginning to achieve. 3 centuries had refined her, strengthened her, turned her into something extraordinary. You're staring, Ara murmured, tucked against his side, her head on his shoulder. Their position mirrored 1,000 moments from their first life together, but carried the weight of all the time between. I'm memorizing, Cassian corrected. You've changed. I want to learn every difference, every new line of experience, every way 300 years shaped you. She smiled, bittersweet. I've done things you'd be proud of, and things you'd question. I've saved lives and ended them. Built something meaningful and made compromises you might not approve of. I'm not the girl you remember. Good. That girl deserved to grow up, to become whoever she wanted to be. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Tell me everything. We have time now, more than we ever thought we'd have. So she did. Sitting in their circle as the sun climbed higher, Era told him about House Thorn, about the decades of building credibility, earning trust, changing vampire culture, one law and one life at a time, about the council's initial resistance, then grudging acceptance, finally active cooperation, about the wars between houses she'd mediated, the young vampires she'd saved from execution, the humans she'd protected from rogue immortals. You built an empire of mercy, Cassian said softly when she finished. Everything I hoped for and more. I built what you started. Your mercy toward me, your choice to teach rather than consume. That was the foundation. I just carried it forward. Her voice caught. For 300 years I carried you forward. Everything I did was asking, what would Cassian do? What would he want? How can I honor his choice to save me? Ara, I never stopped missing you. The words tumbled out. 3 centuries of loneliness finally finding voice. I never stopped wishing you could see what I built. Never stopped talking to your grave as if you could hear me. People thought I was mad. The ancient vampire who visited a cemetery every year, who left flowers at a grave, who spoke to headstones as if they'd answer. I heard you. Cassian turned her to face him fully, caught her hands in his. I don't know how, but I heard you. In the darkness, in death, in whatever exists beyond, I heard your voice, your stories, your love. It was all I had, the only light in an eternity of nothing. She searched his face, tears that couldn't fall gleaming in her eyes. Was it terrible, being dead? Yes and no. It wasn't painful. Just empty, silent. But your voice reached me, like a thread I could follow if I only knew the way back. When you cast the spell, when you called me, I felt it instantly, knew immediately what you were trying to do. His hands tightened on hers. I tried to refuse. Tried to stay dead. You'd built such an extraordinary life. I didn't want you to throw it away for me. Too late. Era smiled through unshed tears. I'd already decided. The moment I found Morgaine's manuscript, I knew I'd try. No price too high, remember? You taught me that. Love is worth any cost. Stubborn. Learned from the best. She leaned forward, kissed him softly. 300 years since the last time, and it felt like coming home. I'm glad you're back. Even if I'd really died, I'd have been glad knowing you woke up again. That you got more time. Cassian corrected firmly. We got more time, both of us. Against all odds and magical law, we both survived. The bond. Era touched her chest, where the connection between them now thrummed like a second heartbeat. I never let it fade. People told me I should, that holding on to a dead vampire's bond was unhealthy, but I couldn't. Letting it go felt like forgetting you, and I'd promised I'd never forget. 300 years of feeding a bond that should have died in 3. No wonder the resurrection magic worked so well. You'd essentially been spellcasting at my grave for centuries without realizing it. He laughed, shaking his head in amazement. Ara, do you understand what you accidentally created? The amount of power required to maintain a turning bond past death, let alone for 3 centuries? You shouldn't have been able to. It's theoretically impossible. Apparently, love makes lots of impossible things possible. Apparently. He stood, drew her up with him. They were both covered in dried blood, exhausted beyond measure, and gloriously, impossibly alive. Come, let's go to the manor. You need rest, and I need to process being awake after 300 years of death. Era hesitated, glancing back at their graves. 2 headstones, both bearing the same death date, 2025. Prophetic once, now obsolete. Should we, I don't know, change them? They're not accurate anymore. Cassian considered, then shook his head. Leave them. Let them stand as memorial to the people who died in this circle. The girl who sacrificed herself and the vampire she resurrected. We're different now. Changed by what happened here. Those graves can honor who we were while we discover who we've become. Poet. Ara teased, but her voice was fond. Some things never change. Some things shouldn't. He took her hand, and together they walked toward the manor, leaving the circle, the graves, and 300 years of separation behind. The wind sighed through the cemetery, content. Magic settled into the earth, satisfied. And somewhere in the space between life and death, reality adjusted itself to accommodate the impossible. 2 vampires, both dead, both resurrected, both saved by love that refused to end. Together again. Chapter 6. The world that changed. The manor was exactly as Cassian remembered and completely different. The structure remained. His wards had held perfectly, maintaining the building against 3 centuries of weather and time. But Ara had changed it, made it hers, filled it with evidence of the life she'd lived without him. Photographs lined the hallway, black and white shifting to color as they progressed through decades. Era with other vampires, some Cassian recognized from his own time. Most he didn't. Ara at what looked like formal vampire council meetings, wearing modern suits that made his ancient sensibilities blink in surprise. Ara, teaching, training, laughing, living, 300 years of life captured in frozen moments. You documented everything, he murmured, stopping before a particular photograph from what looked like the 1,920 seconds. Era in a flapper dress, arm around a dark-haired woman who radiated barely controlled violence. Victoria, Era said, coming to stand beside him. My second in command. I turned her in 1923, saved her from a vampire who'd been feeding on her slowly, torturing her for sport. She became, well, the first success story of what would eventually become House Thorne's core mission. Save the victims, rehabilitate the monsters when possible, end them when not. Cassian absorbed this, moved to the next photo. Era with a scarred man in World War II uniform. Marcus, scholar vampire, neutral party in most house politics. He helped me research for decades, including helping me find the resurrection spell. Another photo. Ara with a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25 when turned, standing in what looked like a bomb crater. Elena, turned during the London Blitz by a vampire who panicked and ran. I found her 3 days into transition, taught her control, gave her purpose. She runs our European operations now. More photos. Dozens of faces. Hundreds. Each one a story, a life Ara had touched, changed, saved. Cassian felt it like a weight and a wonder, 3 centuries of his fledgling building something extraordinary while he slept. "You've been busy," he said inadequately. "I had time." Ara smiled, but her eyes held old grief. "Lots of time. Had to fill it somehow. Saving the world one vampire at a time seemed as good a project as any." They moved into the library, and Cassian stopped short. He'd had perhaps 200 books when he died. The room now held thousands, floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with volumes in dozens of languages. Modern editions, too. A computer desk, filing cabinets, what looked like a small museum's worth of vampire artifacts under glass. "I turned the manor into Housethorn's headquarters," Ara explained, watching him take it in. "Or one of them. We have facilities in 12 cities now. But this place, this was always home, where it started. I never wanted to leave it behind." Cassian reached for a book at random, pulled out a leather-bound journal, opened it to see Ara's handwriting, neater than he remembered but recognizably hers. Asterisk, day 287 since Cassian's death. The council has finally agreed to hear my proposal for mercy-based vampire rehabilitation. Marcus thinks I'm insane. Victoria thinks I'm brilliant. I think I'm just desperate to make his sacrifice mean something. Asterisk. He closed it carefully, throat tight. "You wrote journals. Hundreds of them. 300 years of thoughts, plans, frustrations, victories, losses. I wrote to you. Mostly. Told you about my days as if you'd read them someday." She laughed, self-conscious. Stupid, probably. But it helped. Made me feel less alone. "Not stupid." Cassian set the journal down reverently. "Never stupid. Ara, you're extraordinary. I knew you would be. Saw the potential even when you were terrified and newly turned. But seeing the reality of it, what you built, who you became, I'm still me," she interrupted, suddenly uncertain. "I know I've changed. I had to. 300 years changes everyone, even vampires. But the core of who I am, the girl who brought food to your grave, she's still here, underneath all the rest. I need you to know that." He crossed to her in 3 strides, pulled her close. "I know. I can see her, hear her, feel her." He touched their joined bond, now humming contentedly. "She's the reason this worked. The reason you could maintain a bond for 3 centuries. The reason you never gave up. That girl, that stubborn, compassionate, impossibly brave girl, she's the foundation everything else was built on." Ara relaxed into him, breathing unnecessary relief. "I was afraid you wouldn't recognize me, that I'd changed too much, that you'd wake up and see a stranger wearing familiar skin." "Never." Cassian pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "You could change in 10,000 ways and I'd still know you. Still love you. That's what the bond means, what our love means. It's not contingent on you staying frozen in time. It grows with you, changes with you, deepens as you deepen." "Good." She smiled, genuine warmth now. "Because I have 300 years of stories to tell you, experiences to share, mistakes to confess. I want you to know me as I am now, not just who I was then. Then tell me, we have time now. More time than we ever thought we'd have." Cassian gestured at the library, the photos, the evidence of her extraordinary life. "Show me your world, Ara. Teach me what 300 years taught you. Let me learn this new version of you I've been blessed enough to meet." She took his hand, squeezed. "Where should I start?" "The beginning. From the day I died, tell me everything. I want to know it all. Every triumph and failure, every choice and consequence, every way you became the woman standing before me. That could take weeks." "Good." He smiled, pulling her toward the reading chairs he remembered from their first life. Updated now but still comfortable. "We've been apart for 300 years. We have time for a thorough catching up." So she told him. And he listened. And slowly, carefully, they began weaving their lives back together, connecting 300 years of separation with threads of story and memory and love that had survived death twice. Chapter 7. The Council's Summons. They had 3 days of peace before the outside world intruded. 3 days of stories and relearning each other and simple domestic joy. Cassian learned about smartphones and social media and how drastically vampire society had evolved. Ara learned about what death had been like, about the darkness that had held him, about his experience of her voice reaching through centuries of nothing, 3 perfect days. Then Victoria arrived. Ara felt her. Second-in-command's approach through the bond they shared, fledgling to sire, though far weaker than what she shared with Cassian. She opened the manor door before Victoria could knock, found her oldest friend standing on the threshold with an expression caught between joy and terror. "It's true." Victoria's voice shook. "When Marcus told me, I didn't believe. Said he'd gone mad from too much research. But you're both alive," Ara confirmed, pulling Victoria into a fierce hug. "I know it's impossible. Trust me, I'm still processing. But yes, we're both alive." The spell worked. Victoria returned the embrace, then stepped back to study them both. Her gaze lingered on Cassian, taking in details, assessing threat level out of habit. Cassian Thorne, dead for 3 centuries, and now, not. Victoria. Cassian inclined his head, respectful. "Ara has told me about you. Thank you for being what she needed when I couldn't be there." Something in Victoria's posture relaxed. "She's the best of us. Always has been. If you hurt her, I won't. Simple. Absolute. I've died once already. I'll die again before I cause her pain." "Good." Victoria turned back to Ara, and her expression shifted to grave concern. "We need to talk. The council knows." Marcus tried to keep it quiet, but someone at the archives reported your research, connected it to the magical discharge registered from this location 3 days ago. "They're concerned." "Concerned?" Ara repeated flatly. "I've performed an impossible resurrection concerned, or we're going to execute you for breaking fundamental magical law concerned?" "Both." Victoria pulled out a phone, showed them an official message with the council's seal. "They've summoned you, both of you. Emergency session in London, tomorrow night. Mandatory attendance." Cassian read the message over Ara's shoulder, felt old familiar tension coiling in his stomach. The council. He'd dealt with them before, 300 years ago. They hadn't liked him then, had tolerated him only because his house was powerful and his skills useful. They'd wanted to execute Ara for being turned from near death. If not for his sacrifice, they would have. Now they'd both broken death itself. The council's response was predictable. "They want to end us," he said quietly. "Resurrection magic is forbidden. We've violated one of the oldest laws. Maybe." Ara's jaw set in a stubborn line he remembered well. "Or maybe they just want to understand what happened. The council has changed in 300 years. Some of them remember you, remember what you represented, and I've built relationships there. They trust House Thorne. They trust me." "Ara." Victoria's voice was gentle. 3 of the council members are calling for immediate execution. They're citing precedent from the magical purges of the 1700s. Resurrection magic was banned for a reason. They're not entirely wrong to be concerned. "The purges?" Cassian's blood ran cold. He died before that particular horror. "What happened?" "Vampire war," Ara explained grimly. "Some idiot decided to resurrect an ancient vampire lord from the founding era. Things escalated. Thousands died. Both vampire and human. The council barely contained it. Had to call in witch covens and werewolf packs and make alliances that cost us dearly. Afterward, they banned all resurrection magic. Death penalties for anyone who attempts it. Which you just did. Which I just did." She met his eyes steadily. "And I'd do it again. 1,000 times over. If they want to execute me for it, let them try. I've spent 300 years building House Thorne. I'm not without resources or allies." "This isn't a fight you can win," Victoria interjected. "Even with all of House Thorne behind you. If the council decides to enforce the law, we're talking about potential war. I'll stand with you. You know that. So will most of our people. But Ara, the cost. I know." Ara's voice softened. "Which is why we're going to talk to them. Explain what happened. Make them understand this wasn't reckless necromancy or power grab resurrection. This was love. Ancient magic responding to a bond maintained for 3 centuries. We didn't break death to gain power. We broke it because we couldn't bear to be apart. Love as a legal defense." Victoria laughed without humor. Very poetic. Might even work on some of the council. But the hardliners? They'll say love is the most dangerous motivation. That emotional resurrection is the most unpredictable, most likely to cause problems. Cassian had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke. "What if I went alone, turned myself in, Claimed I manipulated the spell, coerced Ara. They remember me. They already considered me dangerous. If I'm the only one punished, no. Ara cut him off flatly. Absolutely not. We're not doing that. We're not separating again, not playing sacrifice games with each other. We face this together or not at all. Ara, together. She gripped his hand fiercely. That's what the spell proved, isn't it? That together is our strength. That our bond is powerful enough to break death. Running from that, hiding it, that would be denying the very magic that saved us. She's right, Victoria said, surprising them both. Not about the romantic nonsense, though that's very sweet. But strategically, your bond is your best defense. The Council hasn't seen anything like it in, ever, probably. 3 centuries of maintained connection, mutual resurrection, perfect synchronization. That's not dark magic. That's the opposite. That's light magic, creation magic, life magic at its purest. Cassian considered, felt the bond between them thrumming with certainty. Ara was right. Running would solve nothing, and separating would weaken them both. If they were going to face the Council, face potential execution, face the consequences of breaking one of vampire society's most fundamental laws, they'd face tomorrow night, he said finally. London. We'll attend, we'll explain, and we'll accept whatever judgment comes. With one addition, Ara said firmly. We fight if we have to. I've built something important, saved too many lives, changed too much to let the Council end it all because they're scared of magic they don't understand. She looked at Victoria. Prep the house, not for war, but for defense. If this goes badly, I want our people safe. Victoria nodded, already pulling out her phone to send messages. I'll have everyone on standby. Marcus is compiling precedent cases. Elena's rallying the European chapters. We'll be ready, whatever happens. She left, disappearing into the night with vampire speed. Ara and Cassian stood in the doorway, looking out at the cemetery, their graves visible in the distance. Together, Ara said softly, whatever comes. Together, Cassian agreed, pulling her close. Always. But both of them knew tomorrow could end everything they'd fought death itself to reclaim. Chapter 8. The Council of Ancients. The council chamber hadn't changed in 300 years. Cassian remembered it perfectly. A circular room deep beneath London, carved from solid rock, lit by torches that never went out. 13 seats arranged in a ring, occupied by the oldest, most powerful vampires in existence. Above, the ceiling was spelled to show the night sky, stars wheeling in patterns that helped vampires remember they'd once been human, once been alive under those same constellations. He'd stood in this room once before, defending his decision to turn Ara despite her near-death state. He'd lost that argument, been sentenced to let her die or die himself in her place. Now he was back, both of them undead, both of them impossible, both of them waiting to hear their fate. The 13 ancient vampires studied them with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Cassian recognized 5 faces that hadn't changed in over 3 centuries. The others were new, replacements for council members who'd met final death through violence, politics, or simply giving up on immortality. Cassian Thorne. The voice came from the eldest, a vampire so ancient she'd supposedly been turned during the Roman Empire. Her name was Lucia, and she'd always terrified him. Dead for 300 years, yet here you stand. Care to explain? Resurrection magic, Cassian said simply, performed by Ara Thorne using a spell from the 14th century. Complete, successful, unprecedented in scope. Illegal, snapped another council member, one Cassian didn't recognize. Young, relatively speaking, maybe only 500 years old. Resurrection magic was banned after the War of the Revenants. Death penalty for anyone who attempts it, no exceptions. We're aware of the law, Ara said calmly. I broke it deliberately. The question isn't whether I'm guilty. I am. The question is whether the circumstances warrant mercy rather than execution. Mercy. Lucia's lips quirked. How fitting. The founder of House Thorne asking for the same consideration she's extended to thousands of others. The universe has a sense of irony. I'm not asking for myself. Ara stepped forward, projecting confidence Cassian could feel through their bond was only partially genuine. If you want to execute me for performing the resurrection, I'll accept that judgment. But Cassian is innocent. He didn't ask to be brought back, didn't participate in the spell. He was dead and had no agency. Punishing him for my actions would be unjust. Nobility, another council member, an Asian vampire Cassian vaguely recognized from trade negotiations centuries ago, said dryly. But you know we can't execute one of you without executing both. The bond you share, 300 years of maintenance plus simultaneous resurrection, you're essentially one entity now. Kill one, the other follows within days. Cassian felt Era's shock through their connection. She hadn't known, hadn't realized that consequence, but he had felt it the moment he'd fully awakened. Their lives were bound now, completely, irrevocably. They lived together or died together, no middle ground, which is its own problem. The young hostile council member continued. You've created a magical paradox. Two vampires who should be dead, connected by a bond that should be impossible, powered by magic that's explicitly forbidden. You're walking violations of natural law. Letting you exist sets a precedent we can't afford. Natural law, Era repeated, voice hardening. With respect, counselor, what's natural about vampires? We're reanimated corpses who drink blood and live forever. We threw natural law out the window the moment we died and didn't stay dead. Everything about our existence is impossible. She has a point, Lucia said, and Cassian heard surprise in her ancient voice. Respect. We exist because someone, somewhere, performed magic that broke the rules of life and death. Punishing others for doing the same is hypocritical. It's not the same, the young counselor insisted. The first vampires were created by accident, by plague magic gone wrong during the Black Death, or curse magic, depending on which history you believe. Not deliberately, not with full knowledge of consequences. I knew the consequences, Ara said quietly. I researched for decades. Found the spell, understood the cost, chose to pay it. I didn't stumble into this accidentally. I chose Cassian over my own life. I'd make the same choice again. The chamber fell silent. 13 ancient vampires looked at one impossible vampire and her equally impossible sire, and Cassian felt the weight of their judgment like physical pressure. Finally, Lucia spoke. Tell us how. The mechanism. I've studied resurrection magic for centuries, even before it was banned. It shouldn't work on vampires. We're already dead, already operating outside normal life-death boundaries. What made your spell successful? So they explained. Ara detailed the spell's requirements. Morgaine's manuscript, the 300-year maintained bond that had essentially been spell-casting at Cassian's grave without her knowledge. Cassian described his experience of death, of hearing Ara's voice through the darkness, of feeling the spell call him back. Together they described the resurrection itself, the exchange, the mutual sacrifice that had saved them both. When they finished, the council sat in stunned silence. The bond, the Asian vampire said finally. 300 years of maintenance on a connection that should have faded in one. I've never heard of anything like it. That's not just love, that's magical obsession on a scale that borders on miracle. Love is a miracle, Era said simply. Or it is if you're doing it right. Despite the gravity of the situation, several council members smiled. Lucia leaned forward, fixing Ara with an intense stare. You've built something extraordinary with House Thorn. Changed vampire culture in ways we couldn't have imagined 300 years ago. Saved thousands of lives, prevented wars, brokered peace. Would you throw all that away? Risk everything you've built for one vampire? Even one you love? Yes. Ara didn't hesitate. I'd burn the world for him. But I didn't have to. The spell worked. We're both here, both alive, both capable of continuing the work. House Thorn doesn't need just me. It's bigger than one vampire now. But Cassian, he's mine. The world can have my mission, my time, my effort, my immortality, but it doesn't get him. Not again. Not ever. Fortunately, Lucia said, leaning back with a smile, we're not asking you to choose. The chamber erupted into argument, but Lucia raised a hand for silence. We'll vote, as is tradition for capital crimes. 7 votes needed for execution. All in favor of ending Ara and Cassian Thorn for illegal resurrection magic? 4. Hands rose. The young hostile counselor. 3 others Cassian didn't recognize. All in favor of mercy? 9 hands, including Lucia's. Motion fails. Ara and Cassian Thorn will not be executed. Lucia smiled, genuine and warm. Instead, you'll be studied, tested, and documented. Your bond, your resurrection, the magic you've created, It could change everything we know about vampire existence. You've given us a gift, whether you meant to or not. And perhaps, given the right circumstances and proper safeguards, resurrection magic doesn't have to stay forbidden forever. Relief crashed through Cassian so powerfully he nearly staggered. Ara grabbed his hand, squeezed hard, her own shock and joy flooding their bond. However, Lucia continued, voice hardening, there are conditions. You'll submit to regular magical examinations. You'll document everything about your bond, your resurrection, every detail. And if we ever determine your continued existence poses a threat to vampire society, we reserve the right to revisit this decision. Understood, Ara and Cassian said in unison. Then go. Live your impossible life. Love your impossible love. And try to break fewer magical laws in the future. They left the council chamber hand in hand, alive, together, free. Outside, Victoria and the others were waiting, anxious. When they saw Ara and Cassian's expressions, relief exploded through the group. You survived, Victoria breathed. They actually let you go. More than that, Ara said, laughing, almost crying. They're going to study us, learn from us, maybe even change the laws because of us. Of course they are. Victoria shook her head, smiling. Only you could break one of the oldest magical laws and come out as a research subject instead of a corpse. They celebrated that night. House Thorn throwing an impromptu party in the London facility. Cassian met dozens of vampires Ara had turned, saved, or trained, heard their stories, saw firsthand the legacy and she'd built, and realized that bringing him back hadn't been about reclaiming the past. It had been about building a future. Together. Chapter 9. The Battle of Shadows. They returned to the manor 3 days later, exhausted but triumphant, ready to begin their impossible life together. Cassian was still learning modern technology, still adapting to 3 centuries of change. Ara was teaching him, patient and amused, showing him everything from smartphones to social media to how drastically vampire politics had shifted. They'd just settled in for a quiet evening. Ara reading council documents while Cassian learned to navigate the internet. When the wards screamed, both of them were on their feet instantly, vampire instincts flaring. The wards Cassian had placed 300 years ago were sophisticated, complex, designed to alert him to supernatural threats. They'd never failed in his lifetime. That they were screaming now meant something catastrophically dangerous was approaching. How many? Ara demanded, already moving toward the armory she'd installed in what used to be a spare bedroom. Cassian extended his magical senses, reading the wards. 20, maybe 25. All vampire, all powerful, all hostile. House identification? Mixed signatures. This isn't one house. This is a coalition. They stared at each other, understanding clicking into place simultaneously. The council had voted for mercy, but not all vampires answered to the council. Some of the old houses, the traditional powers, would see their resurrection as threat, destabilization, something that needed to be eliminated regardless of official policy. They're coming for us, Ara said flatly, pulling out weapons, spelled blades, holy water, stakes that could actually harm vampires, coming to finish what the council wouldn't. We could run, Cassian offered, though he knew what she'd say. Run where? They know every property I own, every safe house, every hiding place, and running means abandoning the manor, letting them destroy it, destroy our graves, destroy everything we've built here. She met his eyes, fierce. I'm not running, not from our home. Then we fight. We fight. They armed themselves quickly, efficiently. 300 years of experience for Ara, 300 years plus his previous life for Cassian. Stakes, blades, magic items Ara had collected over centuries. They set defensive positions, Cassian refreshing wards while Ara contacted Victoria. Emergency, she said tersely when Victoria answered. 20+ hostiles approaching the manor. Mixed houses. Assassination attempt. I'm sending everyone, Victoria said immediately. Hold for 20 minutes. We'll be there. 20 minutes is a long time in a vampire fight. Then don't die. I've had enough resurrections for 1 century. The line went dead. Ara and Cassian took positions in the manor's main hall, backs to each other, facing the doors. Their bond hummed between them, perfect synchronization, each aware of the other's position, thoughts, battle readiness. The front door exploded inward. Vampires poured through, and the fight began. Cassian moved with lethal grace he'd thought lost to death, muscle memory and vampire speed combining in a deadly dance. He'd been a fighter before he'd been a philosopher, had survived 2 centuries through skill as much as luck. That skill hadn't faded. If anything, resurrection had sharpened it, given him new strength, new speed, new power drawn from the spell that had brought him back. Beside him, Ara fought like a demon. 300 years had made her extraordinary, trained by the best, experienced through countless conflicts, confident in her abilities. She moved through enemies like water, flowing around attacks, striking with precision, showing no hesitation. They were magnificent together, but they were outnumbered. "Library!" Cassian shouted, recognizing the tactical disadvantage of the open hall. They retreated, fighting backward, using doorways as choke points. The library could be defended better, had fewer entry points, better sight lines. They'd just reached it when something changed. The attacking vampires pulled back, regrouping, and through the ranks stepped someone Cassian recognized. Theron, he breathed, shock and dismay flooding through him. The vampire who'd entered was ancient, older than Cassian, younger than the council's eldest members. He'd been Cassian's friend once, centuries ago. They'd fought together, survived together, built their house's alliance together. "Hello, old friend," Theron said softly. "I'd hoped I wouldn't have to do this." "Then don't," Cassian replied. "Walk away. Take your people and leave. You know I can't. You know what you represent, what you've done. Resurrection magic, Cassian. You broke the oldest law. The council may have been swayed by sentiment, but some of us remember why that law exists." His eyes flicked to Ara. "And you? House Thorn's Mercy Initiative. Noble, truly, but naive. You've weakened vampire culture, made us soft. Now you perform forbidden magic and expect no consequences?" "The council judged us," Ara said coldly. "Voted for mercy. This attack violates council authority. You're the one breaking law. The council is outdated, corrupted by modern sentiment. Some of us remember the old ways, when vampires were apex predators, not missionaries of mercy." Theron drew a blade, wicked sharp, spelled with magic, Cassian recognized as specifically anti-vampire. "You're a threat, both of you. A magical anomaly that could destabilize everything. Better to end you now, quickly, before the precedent spreads." "Over my dead body," Ara snarled, positioning herself between Theron and Cassian. "That's the plan." The fight resumed, more vicious now. Theron was skilled, ancient, powerful. His supporters were similar, old house's best warriors. Cassian and Ara fought with everything they had, but, slowly, inevitably, they were being pushed back, overwhelmed. Cassian took a blade to the shoulder, spelled to slow vampire healing. Ara took a stake to the thigh, barely missing her femoral artery. They were losing, dying for the second time, this time permanently. Then the ward screamed again, different tone. Friendlies approaching. House Thorn had arrived. Victoria burst through the walls, literally, smashing through the manor's side entrance with 20 vampires behind her. Marcus came through windows. Elena appeared from the basement, bringing more reinforcements. The fight transformed. No longer execution, now genuine battle. House Thorn's vampires were well-trained, coordinated, loyal. They'd come for their leader, and they fought like it mattered. Cassian and Ara, bleeding but alive, rallied. With support, with allies, with House Thorn living up to its reputation, the tide turned, slowly, bloodily. But it turned. Theron, seeing the battle lost, disengaged. "This isn't over," he spat, retreating toward the exit. "You can't protect them forever, and when you fail, we'll be waiting." Then he and his surviving vampires fled, disappearing into the night. Silence fell. The manor was destroyed, furniture shattered, walls damaged, blood everywhere. But they were alive, both of them, still standing, still together. "That," Ara said, leaning heavily on Cassian, "was closer than I'd like." "Agreed." He pulled her close, assessed her injuries. "Serious but not fatal." "We need to—" "Already calling healers," Victoria interrupted, phone to her ear. "And reporting this to the council." Theron violated direct council judgment. "There will be consequences." "Let me guess," Ara said tiredly. "Political nightmare. House alliances shifting. Potential for larger conflict." "Probably." Victoria smiled grimly. "But you're alive. So we'll deal with it. They dealt with it. Healers came, treated wounds, assessed damage. The council issued warrants for Theron and his accomplices. House Thorn locked down security, and Cassian and Ara, battered but alive, held each other in their destroyed home and were grateful. They'd survived death twice and assassination once. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Chapter 10. Forever begins again. 6 months after the attack, the manor had been rebuilt. House Thorn had helped. Dozens of vampires coming to repair walls, replace furniture, restore what Theron's assassination attempt had destroyed. But they'd made changes too. Updated security, added defenses, transformed the manor into something that honored the past while embracing the future. Much like Cassian and Era themselves, Cassian had adapted to the modern world with surprising ease, helped by Ara's patient teaching and his own fascination with how much had changed. He joined House Thorn officially, lending his centuries of experience to their mission. Turned out his skills, diplomatic, strategic, philosophical, were exactly what the organization needed as it expanded. He and Ara worked together now, partners in every sense. They taught young vampires control, negotiated treaties between houses, investigated reports of vampire predation. Separately, they were formidable. Together, with their bond and combined experience and absolute synchronization, they were nearly unstoppable. The council had kept their word. Regular testing, documentation, studying the magical anomaly they represented. But not intrusively. With respect. With genuine scientific curiosity about what their resurrection might mean for vampire magic as a whole. And slowly, cautiously, resurrection magic was being reconsidered. Not opened up freely, the dangers were too real, but studied, understood. Potential applications for certain circumstances explored. They'd change the world, again, together. Tonight, though, wasn't about world changing. Tonight was about them. Ara stood in the cemetery, at the 2 graves that had started everything. The headstones had been updated with new inscriptions. Asterisk Cassian Thorn, 1,623 to 1,825, 2025 to 2025, 2025 present. Savior, remembered, resurrected. Asterisk Ara Thorn, 1,809 to 2025, 2025 present. The girl who woke him twice. Asterisk. She smiled, running her fingers over the carved letters. Cassian joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist, pulling her close. Nostalgic? He asked softly. Always. This place, these graves, they're where it all began, where I was just a lonely girl who couldn't bear forgotten things, where you were just a vampire trapped by blood magic and waiting to die. And now we're so much more. She leaned into him, content. Leaders, teachers, partners, lovers. 2 vampires who broke death because we couldn't stand to be apart. Twice, Cassian added with a smile. You broke it twice. Once to bring me back. Once when I brought you back. Fair's fair. Fair's fair, she agreed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise over the cemetery. Autumn again. November. The month of their meeting. 306 years since Ara had first stumbled on a forgotten grave. 303 years since Cassian had woken to find a girl who'd been feeding his humanity. 300 since his death, and 6 months since his resurrection. Time measured in centuries and moments, both equally important. I have something for you, Cassian said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Been meaning to do this properly. Should have done it 300 years ago, but I thought we didn't have time. Stupid, in retrospect. Era's breath caught as he opened the box, revealed a ring. Simple silver band, inscribed with Latin, asterisk simul in vita, simul in morte, simul in aeternum, asterisk together in life, together in death, together in eternity. We're already bonded, Cassian said, dropping to one knee despite the complete lack of necessity given their situation. Blood-bound, soul-bound, magically connected in ways that have never existed before. But I want the human gesture too. Want to ask properly. Ara Thorn, will you marry me? Again, I suppose, given we've already sworn ourselves to each other in every way that matters. But I'd like the symbol, the ring. The promise made before witnesses that we're choosing each other, forever. Ara laughed, crying, pulled him up to kiss him fiercely. Yes, absolutely yes, to human gestures and vampire bonds and every kind of together we can create. He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Magic and love and 300 years of connection ensured it. How long do you think we have? Ara asked, the question that haunted them both. They'd been given a second chance, but forever was never guaranteed. Especially not for vampires who'd already died once, been resurrected through forbidden magic, attacked by assassination attempts. I don't know, Cassian answered honestly. Could be centuries, could be years, could be tomorrow if Theron comes back with a bigger army. Then we'd better make every moment count. Agreed. They kissed there, between two graves marking deaths that had been transcended, surrounded by a cemetery that held hundreds of forgotten stories. But theirs wouldn't be forgotten, would never be forgotten. They'd make sure of it, through House Thorn, through their work, through the lives they saved and changes they made. And if someday they truly died, if true death came for them a second time, they'd face it together, just as they'd faced everything else, with courage, with love, with absolute certainty that what they had was worth any cost. Come on, Ara said, tugging Cassian toward the manor. Victoria's waiting. She helped me plan something. Plan what? A wedding, obviously. Can't get properly engaged without planning a wedding. She's been messaging me all evening. Apparently there are 17 vampire traditions we need to honor, and she's personally offended we didn't include her in the proposal. Cassian laughed, genuine and free. Of course she is. Lead on, love. Let's go plan our impossible wedding for our impossible life. They walked toward the manor together, leaving the graves and the past behind. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but transcended. The girl who'd fed kindness to darkness had grown into a woman who'd resurrected the dead. The vampire who'd been imprisoned by blood magic had become a man who'd found freedom through love. Together they'd built something extraordinary. House Thorn. A mission of mercy. A bond that broke death twice. A love story that spanned centuries. And now, a future. Epilogue. 50 years later, Ara and Cassian Thorn stood in the cemetery again, on the anniversary of their first meeting. The graves remained, lovingly maintained, monument to where their story began. But around them, everything had changed. House Thorn operated in 43 cities now. Vampire predation had decreased 70%. Human-vampire relations were the best they'd been in recorded history. Resurrection magic, carefully regulated, had been legalized for specific circumstances, saving vampires who'd been killed unjustly, allowing loved ones to return in crisis situations, all because two vampires had loved each other enough to break death. Twice. They'd married 3 times. Once in a traditional vampire ceremony with the full council attending. Once in a human ceremony for symbolic reasons. Ara in white, Cassian in a suit, both of them tearfully happy. Once in a private ritual in the manor, just the two of them, renewing vows every anniversary since. They'd fought wars, brokered peace, saved thousands, lost some, built a legacy that would outlast them both. But the best moments were always the quiet ones. Standing in a cemetery at midnight, holding hands, remembering the lonely girl and the imprisoned vampire who'd found each other against all odds. Happy anniversary, Cassian murmured, pressing a kiss to Ara's temple. Happy anniversary, she returned, smiling. 356 years since we met. 306 since you died. 50 since you came back. And counting. And counting, he agreed. Above them, stars wheeled in ancient patterns. Around them, the dead rested peacefully. Ahead of them, an immortal future stretched, uncertain but beautiful. Together, always together. The wind sighed through the cemetery, carrying whispers of love stories past and present. And 2 vampires, both impossible, both resurrected, both proof that some magic was stronger than death, walked hand in hand toward their manor, toward their family, toward their forever. Behind them, 2 graves stood as memorial, not to death, but to transformation, not to endings, but to beginnings. Asterisk. Here lies a man who saved many, remembered by one, resurrected by love. Asterisk, asterisk. Here lies the girl who woke him. Twice. Asterisk, asterisk. Here lies proof that some things are worth any cost. Asterisk, asterisk. Here lies love that conquered death itself. Asterisk. The cemetery settled into silence. content. Another chapter written. Another year added to an impossible story. Another proof that love, true love, could work miracles even death couldn't diminish. And in the manor on the hill, lights blazed warm and welcoming, filled with laughter and life, and a family built from mercy and second chances. The gravekeeper's tale was far from over. It was just beginning.